Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight, what a time it is to be alive, guys. What a time, what a time. I am so excited. We're really living, in my opinion, in revolutionary times. Can you imagine just to have next week, Monday, tomorrow, the Democratic National Convention opens, and this week we will have a Black Asian American woman at the head of a Democratic ticket as for President of the United States of America. As I live and breathe, we didn't see this coming 3 weeks ago, but it's here, right? And so, despite all of our collective enthusiasm across the country, we have to do more than just be excited. We've got to do the hard work. We got to get out to vote. There's still a lot of impediments for people to vote with different rules that have come up because a lot of the Voting Rights Act has been gutted. So in some places, you got to make sure you have your ID in on time and all of these other things. So let's get into it. I've got three very exciting guests. And if you're a regular viewer of this show, you will recognize some of these ladies. And we're going to discuss the election from our points of view from the various states that we're in. And also, we're going to discuss the possible bad actors on election boards who might decide not to certify votes. That can happen. So let's get this conversation started. First up, I have Mary Rarick. Mary is known professionally as a caffeine addicted super connector. She is a communications consultant. Mary leverages her rage and guilt hangover from 2016 to step out of her introverted shell and to become a grassroots political activist. Mary is also a producer and host at You Can't Beat Blue show on YouTube and is a volunteer for Run for Something. She has also created the podcast My Act 4, where she figures out her next act out loud. Welcome back, Mary, to the show from Portland, Oregon.
Thank you so much, Pam. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And next up, we have Fennell Norton. Fennell made her mark on the political scene in 2021 when she entered the race for the Virginia House of Delegates. Although she didn't win that race, Fennell quickly became a key player in the political arena. She has been welcomed as a contributor to the Badass Strategies by Network Nova. And she is a host on the weekly video podcast called Friday Power Lunch. Since 2022, Fennell has moderated the Salon series for the National Women's Political Caucus. Fennell served for 26 years as a senior executive at Bank of America. Her blend of corporate expertise and her passion for political activism makes her a formidable advocate for progress and change. Welcome back to the show, Fennell, from Virginia.
Delighted to be here.
So good to see you. And last but certainly not least, we have KL Newhouse, Chief Culture, Conflict, and Media Crisis Strategist. She is the founder of New Image Communications. In 2025, KL will launch New Joy Media and Untrauma Mediation. KL is a 25-year practitioner and subject matter expert with a very robust practice portfolio. She is a graduate of the Pepperdine School of Law. KL is also a media trainer and a disinformation and election rhetoric disruptor. How about that? As a certified DEI trainer, KL brings a wealth of talent and services to any organization or individual that wishes to elevate their executive goals to another level. Welcome back to the show, KL Newhouse from California. Oh, you're on mute, KL.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you yet once again. And I am just excited about what this evening's discussion will bring. And thank you, Pam, for all of your hard work behind the scenes.
Thank you. Thank you. So, listen, ladies, each of you come from very different states of the country. Tell me what you're hearing about election 2024 in your neck of the woods. And also feel free to talk about anything that's happening specifically in your local situation in your state. Mary, I'll go with you first.
Well, I live in a Democratic bastion or bubble here in Portland, Oregon. So Portland, or Oregon in general, is thought to be a blue state. We're actually a very purple state, and it is Portland, the metro area, that keeps this state blue. The rest of it, kind of scary sometimes. As far as the local races go, it's going to be tricky this year because there are a lot of races that I have a feeling Republicans might win, and it's a little bit scary. The law and order candidates don't have to declare a party affiliation, so they can kind of dance along the middle and, run for commissioners and commissioner positions and auditor positions, things like that. And that's a little bit scary. So we have to look at where the money comes from, right? Who's supporting them? Where's the money coming from? What do their endorsements look like?
Interesting. That's really interesting because that's one of the main things that I know I keep reiterating to people: vote blue up and down the ballot. But if you don't know what a person's position truly is, then that's really ambiguous. You don't know. I don't like that. Okay.
I was just going to say, some of them have changed their voters registration only recently too.
Oh, really? Interesting. I tell you, Fennell, tell me what's going on there in Virginia, in your neck of the woods.
So Virginia is pretty interesting and very exciting. It wasn't but a few weeks ago that they thought that Virginia was trending towards the red. And along came Vice President Kamala Harris, and I think that they're going to run away from Virginia. But that doesn't stop the very interesting congressional races that we have. And so we have a really popular seat in Northern Virginia, two of them actually. They were led by women, Democratic women, but now two men won the primaries. And so we're still very optimistic about those. They're very popular. And then we have two other seats that we're really excited about. They're actually two Black women who are running in these very, very, I quote, red districts, but they also look hopeful too. And so what I get really excited about is I just believe that everything should be considered on the table. The issues that we have this year, everyone should fight as hard as we can. And even if we don't win those districts, they will help at the top of the ticket because we'll bring people out, and it will also build enthusiasm because you don't always have to win the first time. You just start making progress year after year.
Okay. All right. So California, California's just a small state. No. California, what's happening in your specific neck of the woods, KL? What city are you in?
I'm along the coastal beach enclaves. So what I would say is that there's a mixed bag because there was a 2018 Orange County went blue surprise, and I literally was at that time on a contract with the Register of Voters office. I've worked every level or angle from elections, from presidential to state and local, you name it. I've worked it. That includes school board, city council, mayoral, and then I worked for Congress, and then now work the voter side. So like literally in the voter registrar's office. And I can tell you, just as a general PSA, it's so difficult to cheat an election. it is just ridiculous to say. If you understood all the steps and layers of what's required and how exhausting the process is to go through ballots, open ballots, enter ballots, while people are standing over you,
Mhm.
and then input that data, reconfigure that data in terms of the next person who then you hand that data off to, then you recount the ballots, then you canvass the ballots. So I'm saying that to say that even in California, that gets contentious. So I really caution people not to be disillusioned by what they think is this deeply blue West Coast sort of milieu and culture. It is like any other state in the union. Your urban, more established cities, counties tend to be very pro-democracy, very engaged in, how do we work for people? How do we be collective? How do we be community oriented? And then the outer skirts, and a little bit of that touches where I live. So I'll give you a real quick story to amplify that, is oftentimes very not red, because I really want us to focus on away from colors and more on policy. I mean, tightly, heavily entrenched MAGA,
Mhm.
to the point of when I was just running my typical errands a couple of days ago, this gentleman had set up on the sidewalk a tent, and it was laced with 45 paraphernalia.
Mm.
At the same time that he had a flag from the branch of service that he had served in. So this happened 2 days after his dear leader had insulted everybody who's ever in any way served in the military.
Right.
So the disconnect, the cognitive dissonance is almost comical if it weren't so dangerous.
Yeah. Oh goodness, I tell you, it is crazy out here. Every Showy Howie says she's out of Michigan. We've been having issues with sharing the Harris campaign material we have access to. Oh boy. So, anyways, listen, you guys know I am a native of Michigan, but have been living here in North Carolina for a long time, and our candidate for governor has made national news. He is awful. He is awful. He is on the GOP side, of course, the awful one. His name is Mark Robinson. He's also our state's lieutenant governor. I mean, and that's the shocker, because Roy Cooper is our governor, who was being considered as a vice presidential run. But they say that one of the reasons why Roy Cooper took his name out of the hat was because he didn't know what would happen when he would be away, with Mark Robinson being his lieutenant governor. So, he took that L. But the good news is that I heard that Mark Robinson is 10 points behind Josh Stein, who is also our attorney general. And I want to show you guys some of the awful things that Mark Robinson has said.
Well, the media is great picking up all of his derogatory and vile language.
Yeah. So there he is with his mouth open, fussing. Transgender women should just defecate in public. In other words, he says they can't go to the bathroom. Just they should be arrested for using a bathroom, and they just need to go find a corner outside somewhere. It's time to start reading quotes from Hitler and Stalin. Okay, because evidently somebody gathered for a Moms for Liberty Blessings of a Liberty breakfast in July of last year. Instead of criticizing that group for quoting Hitler in their June newsletter, he said it's time to start reading quotes from the fascist strongmen like Hitler and Stalin. Once a woman is pregnant, it's not her body anymore. He's just on and on. Transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that is filth. He calls LGBTQ people maggots and flies. Black Panther was that the movie Black Panther was made by an agnostic Jew and a satanic Marxist. Michelle Obama, he says, is a secretly transgender woman. And Black Democrats are slaves. So he just, he's just
Well, this is why it's so good that he's 10 points behind, but frankly, he should be 30 points behind.
he
So
really
I think you sort of have to, I mean, we always have these conversations about, never punch down to voters, but I do think that voters have to have a responsibility for the kinds of things that they support. I mean, they are so open about who Democrats support and that we are the people that we support. I think that it's time for, when you vote for a candidate like that, you have to really take a look in the mirror and say, what kind of person are you who would support people saying those kinds of things, that kind of cruelty? What kind of person is it? Now, I will say that I do believe that oftentimes people don't actually see these things. I think that they watch Fox News and they watch some other outlets, and I think they really are shielded from some of the things that people actually say. And not only that, the people that we're trying to reach don't always know the kinds of things that these people are saying. And so that's why it becomes our responsibility to make sure that we're talking and making sure that we're talking to family and friends and sharing information and content so that they can be really, really informed about who they are voting for and who they should be voting for.
right. One thing that scares me is that last April we had a woman who was a Democrat in our state government, and she flipped, and it was all by design because she had gotten out of the state legislature for a while, and because she decided to run again, and she's in a blue district, everybody thought, oh, we know her, and they voted her in, and girlfriend flipped on us, and that's what messed up our state legislature. That's what messed us up on abortion and some other things, because of that one Democrat flipping on us. So we have to really be knowledgeable about as much as we can about these candidates in these down ballot races. I say vote blue all the way, but you want to, but you still find out what they're talking about too. So ladies, I just saw a Washington Post poll that has VP Harris leading nationally 49% to 45%. And while this is all wonderful, I'm just giddy with the news. We know that we still have about 79, 78 days to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
79, exactly.
79. So we still aren't out of the woods because they've got a lot of money. They have a horrible vice president or whatever. Tell me, what do you guys think about their campaigning overall? Who wants to go first? Any of you?
Well, I would suggest that they're not campaigning because they have essentially a zero ground game that is activated and connecting with grassroots and has set up campaign offices. You have someone who is in the lineage of 45 who has never run an election party and campaign who happens to be in charge. So there is no expertise or data or support for being able to implement and execute a campaign because they don't intend to campaign. They've pulled where they had specific offices. There's been this belief that it's a lack of money because a lot of the money that's coming in is, according to the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, being used improperly because it's being used to support his legal battles and other items that are not election oriented. So there's been this belief that's been allowed to stand that most of it is about the money. I would posit that because there is a plot and a plan to actually steal the election, that there's no need to campaign. And because this isn't rhetoric, this isn't election spewing, this isn't puffery, this isn't exaggeration. They have put the people in place who are election deniers, who can choose not to certify, which typically was as important as a ribbon cutting at your new grocery store.
Right.
Now it's been weaponized to be utilized for the purposes of delay and litigation. Because one thing about them, they aren't in higher numbers than we are. They don't exist larger. As you will look over the most immediate elections, the popular vote always swings Democratic. But the popular vote is comprised of people who don't recognize the importance of how they've been organizing for decades upon decades to ensure that they can have a moment such as this to steal the election, which is going to negate votes. They're going to toss it into a stalemate where if you don't hit those constitutional and U.S. code statutory timelines, then it will then swing to, surprise, surprise, the MAGA Speaker of the House being designated the president. And that will be why the Supreme Court determines, I switch around a lot of those letters and suggest undermines the vote because they are bound and determined to coronate a King D.
Okay, so saying all of that, why did we not get away from, and Mary, I'm going to shoot this to you and then to you for now. Why did we not get rid of the Electoral College when Bush versus Gore went down back in 2000?
Boy, don't you wish. And codified row, and I mean, there's just so many things, right? So many things, and we look back and we look, we kind of frittered it away. I'm sure actually KL should be speaking to this honestly, but I appreciate what you said because that's exactly why they're not doing anything. They don't think they have to. I'm just going to say it's why we have to come out. We have to get people out in such large numbers that it's stupid. It's stupid simple what it looks like. That's our job because I can't control the other part, right? I can't control that. And we can't look back. We can only look forward and deal with what we got literally right in front of us.
Right. Now, what are we going to do? Because what KL knew what her assignment was for this show. So what are we going to do? Because if we don't come out in huge numbers, I mean huge, y'all, like bring your sandwiches, a folding chair. I'm serious. You got to have your own drinks. Who outlawed you couldn't give water out? That was
Atlanta, Georgia.
It was in Georgia. Did Texas do that too? Or was it just Georgia that did
I'm
that?
not sure if it's codified, but they have started to mirror like the typical monkey see, monkey do states. I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a surprise while you're standing in line in Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, amplifying it even more. I wouldn't be surprised. But in terms of precisely knowing if it's been codified, I do not know that. But I just would suggest be prepared.
For now?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. I agree with everything that KL said. This is exactly what happened in 2020. And I also agree with what Mary said. It's in the past. So all we can do is look forward. So what must we do now? And it is exactly right. We have to come out in really, really big numbers. And though folks are really enthusiastic about the polls, when we were down in the polls, we said, hey, don't pay attention, don't watch the polls. And we shouldn't watch the polls now. So even though we see ourselves increasing in the polls, we should run, we're 10 points behind. Because here's what's really important. At the end of the day, we talk about how close this election is going to be. And remember how many people actually voted for Donald Trump in 2020. It was a lot. And so part of the challenge that we have is for folks to understand what's at stake. Because when we talk about some of these things, they'll say, oh, that really can't happen. And that's not happening because we are in this bubble of information. But there are 7 out of 10 people who have no idea what the heck is going on. And that is because these are not conversations that we have at our dinner table. It's not conversations that we have often with our friends and family. It's not the conversation we have at a family reunion or at a cookout or at a picnic. And we have got to start being courageous enough to have those conversations. That means for me, What I am fearful of is that we won't take all of this enthusiasm and intent and put it into action. So what does that look like? If we want these big numbers, what are the actions that we have to do very specifically, not just ourselves, but we pull in our family and our friends and our acquaintances and our churches and everybody, because this is our civil rights movement right now. And so when I see people not taking it serious, I sort of scratch my head and go, what are you thinking? And it is because this is not the conversation at our dinner table. And I'll tell you, one of the books that I've been reading lately is Mary McLeod Bethune,
Oh,
who was just fabulous and so courageous. And
yeah.
I think about the number of people who don't want to put a sign in their yard, or they don't want to, do the phone thing, or they don't want to text their friends. People, this is the moment that you've got to come out of your shell and be courageous. And she also says, and this is what's so important to me, that being engaged in your local politics and ethics, she says, is a burden and a responsibility. And so this is our time now to pick up the mantle, because we got to go. It's go time.
It's go time. It's go time, show time. We can't miss a beat. We can't miss a beat, and we can't be afraid to speak up and say something. One thing, I want to show you something that gave me some hope. And it's in an area of our country that we didn't expect to see so much support. And here it is. Oh, huh. Do you see it, guys?
Floridia's out for Harris.
Yes.
We don't see a video.
Do you see the
No.
No video.
But you're working it. These things are always complicated in the show.
video?
Mhm. It sounds as though the audio might be pulling through.
The audio came through, but why didn't the video show through? Oh shoot. Anyways, I'll tell you what it was. It was the villages of, they call it the villages of Florida, and it was just a mass of gray heads moving around at a Kamala Harris thing that they were trying to get people interested or whatever. And I was shocked. I was really shocked. So yeah, I don't know why that didn't show through.
I think that's pretty amazing, Pam. That was an excellent point, because the orange one was like, oh no, that's not real. That's not real. But it is real, because what I am really optimistic about is the fact that the things that Vice President Harris is talking about are real things that impact people. So I know that we won't get the ones who are just all the way over with the they've drank all the Kool-Aid, but people who are clear-headed, who understand what it takes for them to move forward in their lives, to want to have a successful retirement. These are clear-headed people, and they may be Republicans. Many of them are. And that's what's telling you, that's what's moving this along. So that's what gives me hope, is that there are more people who are clear-eyed about what's happening than we realize. I mean, think about it. You've got evangelicals for Harris. You've got Republicans for Harris. You've got white dudes for Harris. You've got every group you can imagine, which is really giving people this permission structure to say, we're not going back to whatever this stuff is that he's talking about. They are very much interested in moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mary, you had mentioned something to me before the start of the show about Project 2025. And what was it that you wanted to make a point about?
Well, my point is that when we talk about these things, Democrats, we can be a little wonky and all policy and very precise with our language and all that. I think we need to be a little bit more plain spoken. And I think we need to talk to people about matters that affect them, or that they see as that might be a shock if things are taken away from them. And I was thinking about how to message this. I mean, white men, right? They're a huge problem. White women, we're up there too. Don't get me started. But if we said Project 2025, or if we just said Republicans, because they're trying to distance themselves from this blueprint document that they do plan to follow, right? They've already started it. They're planning on following it. They're trying to back away from it. We just say, oh, did you know Republicans plan to ban porn? And, that should be shocking, but that group of people might be paying attention to that in the same way that if we say, raise your hand if you want an old white man telling you if and when to start your family, right? Because that is the kind of language that young women need to think about, because we know since Roe was overturned already, they're not just talking about these things. No, there's a concerted effort to control women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I could, Pam,
Uh-huh.
we had done these little we call them little nuggets, and they're these little cards that we hand out to people, just wherever you are, so that they can be well informed about what's going on. And it was when I had this notion about democracy that people were really sort of hearing the word democracy, but not really equating it to the freedoms that they had. Everybody would laugh because one of the things that I had on there would be like, freedom to rap, freedom to sing, freedom to read, and I had freedom to twerk. And they're like, what are you saying? And I said, yeah, because, if this whole white Christian nationalism thing happens, you won't be twerking anymore. And so it was real funny, but really the whole point is that all of those things that we consider part of what we do, who we are, the fun we have, are not what they think we should be doing. And so those things matter to anybody who says, I should be able to dance how I want to. And that wouldn't be the case.
Right, absolutely. So getting on the so we getting back on this little dark side of this whole conversation, KL, I got to come to you about, we know that we have these election deniers have been elected as some electoral boards across the country. We know that. And I also learned that every state's rules about certifying elections is different. Everybody is different. There's this one guy that came on on MSNBC, and he was talking about that there needs to be, a national way that we do it that is uniform, that we don't have all these different rules. So what is the line of defense that, say, if in Arizona, for instance, somebody says, we're not doing it, Carrie Lake, we think Carrie Lake should have won for governor, and forget it, we're not going to certify. What is the step what happens then? What do we do? You call up the NAACP? What do you do? What happens?
Well, I will revisit what I attempted to spill out with just some bullet points earlier, and I would push back. It's about numbers, and it's not about numbers. I mean, one of the things I share with you frequently, Pam, is when I talk about end game, that it's math, maps, and money. They've already organized. They out-organize us. They've outplanned us by decades. So what's problematic is that when you've seated 70 plus, you can go read the Rolling Stone article. You can also refer back to Rachel Maddow's show on MSNBC from 9th to 10th, I believe, the 9th, which was a Friday, that talks about these election deniers, non-certifiers. They are specifically, this is Project 2025 already in action.
Yeah.
This is not esoteric and some cerebral brain exercise. The laws in Mississippi, everything that has happened in the last couple of years that has been regressive legislation, that is in the Project 2025 playbook. Seating these election deniers, seating the Supreme Court, and seating the 200 plus judges at the federal level, which when people say elections don't matter, well, this is where that comes home. At the federal level, these people are already armed and in place to ensure that this election is stolen. So the language that you're hearing from 45 about, I don't need votes,
Right.
just vote one more time, vote. What he is doing It's like what children do when they try to repeat adult conversations, because he doesn't have the sophistication of context, and he doesn't have, and then it always has the absence of content. But what he is doing in those morsels is dropping truth nuggets of what he overheard, because this is what the plan is. They're just using him as they did before as a Manchurian candidate. So we can go to the polls, we can outnumber, we can get these large margins. What we need to do is have an infrastructure that thwarts and basically ensures that we can immobilize, because this is what we don't seem to have in place, or if we do, no one's talking about it publicly. We need to immobilize cyber attacks, AI, bots, misinformation, disinformation, dissuasion campaigns, deflection campaigns, because all of those things create an environment for disenfranchisement, even when you've casted your vote, if they plan to negate your vote. And they plan to negate your vote because they've already told you, we don't need your vote. They
Yeah.
put these soldiers in place. And what I keep saying, I will say again and again. Please go read the Constitution, Article 2. Go read the U.S. Code statutory language in Section 2, Section 5. Because what that tells you is that when an election is contested is not certifying, because when the state becomes activated to not certify, all the federal elections also don't count. We're not hearing or not seeing or not comprehending. I don't know which one it is. And I'm a big fan of joy. Joy is a big part of why I can function right now, because after a 30-year rape and having to process that trauma, you can read all about it in my book. But let me tell you something. Joy is not a plan. Hope is not a plan. And these people have been planning. We need to create the infrastructure at the polls, at the precincts, in the courts. We need to be armed and ready. 1-866 our vote if you encounter any issues at the poll, at your precinct.
Fix our vote.
1-866 our vote. Common Cause, commoncause.org. .gov website should be your sources. .gov. .orgs are supposed to be safe, but some of them are misconstrued by some of these think tanks that MAGA runs. Leadership this, freedom that, civil this. They are brilliant with language, and that's why they are winning this. It's going to be language, legalities, and legislation. And we've got to ensure that we have an infrastructure to combat disinformation, dissuasion, deflection, and disenfranchisement. And you cannot just do that with numbers, joy, and hope. And I'm a fan. The whole notion that we are in a place, from the historical context of Black women being used as commodities to manufacture economic, the economy, to literally be put in a position after rape, brutality, kidnapping, false imprisonment, work camps, to now literally already be positioned to be one beat away from the White House. And the possibility of being the institutionalized power of what is considered the most powerful country in the world. That is a lot of miracles that had to happen for all of that to be in place. Thank you, ancestors. Thank you, all of our people who have worked and ensured that this position is possible. But that is not enough. It is not enough.
So, Kale, you told us all of this, and we're getting ready to go vote in 79 days. And so if this happens, these people that are in place, one thing I can say, Kamala is the prosecutor. So what I mean, so it's just gonna be on and popping then. Because nobody,
if they put a team together who specifically is on election watch. Now, there are a number of organizations that are watchdog organizations like Common Cause.
right.
So when I say I'm very skeptical even about some .orgs, Common Cause, I'm vouching for them. So they are a election watchdog organization. At the end of this, I hope that you will reserve for me like 30 seconds to kind of go through some cited, vouched sources, because these are the places we need to turn to and stop listening to, the housewives who just now got an opinion on politics 2 days ago, and then decide because we like them and that they wear all of the Lux items that all of a sudden they're experts. If you're not listening to tried and true experts, scholars, people who've studied and trained, I'm going to wonder how it is you're processing information, because I personally am making an appeal for my life, and I don't intend to be hyperbolic. These people have an absolute agenda of destruction, and we haven't been planning at the same time. We've had no parallel plan.
We haven't. And Fennell, why haven't we had a parallel plan? Because we know they didn't come up with 900 pages of Project 2025, which really, by the way, is already, there are elements of this already in place that we're seeing already. Why haven't we done that for now? And then
So,
Mary.
so here's what I would say, and I think that what KL is saying is absolutely true. I'm going to try to be a little more optimistic, though. So in Virginia, we do have folks who are already on hand, who are watching for the election. We have the phone numbers we call in our state. Whoever is the governor, they have more people. So it's 2-to-1 in most precincts in terms of how many people are actually overlooking your election. And we do have all of the infrastructure in place to ensure that our elections are fair, and that if people are having issues with voting, we have that in place. And I do know that there are organizations like Mark Elias and his group who are on this all the time in terms of trying to ensure that elections are fair. And they do have some things that we are not aware of that are happening in the background. I think I would be really bewildered if I believed that the administration didn't have plans in place, just like they did, and they fired the guy who said these elections are fair. Here are all the processes that we went through. So there are things that are in place in terms of if an election has to have a recount, which is why many of the state party chairs are like, hey, we can prevent this if we have big numbers, and then there's no reason to have recounts. We are still going to have people who are going to take things to court. Our responsibility as citizens, there's only certain things that we can do at this point, which is volunteer to be a poll watcher, volunteer to be out there, ensure that people in line are getting there and that their votes are being counted. Make sure that you have your election chief and they are paying attention to what's going on. So I think that those things are the things that we can do to ensure that where we are, and if you can travel to places where they need additional support for their poll watchers and folks who are in there watching the election, that we do those things. That is what we can do.
Mm-hmm. Mary?
I was just going to say, in 2021, we had friends. She's a lawyer. He's an engineer, also just wicked smart, but she's a lawyer. They actually flew, and this is, before vaccines, right? And COVID and all the rest of it. They flew from Oregon to Georgia because here in Oregon, we vote by mail. Everybody votes by mail. That's how we do things, right? Safe, easy, at your table, you've got some time, you can just sit and do it. But they knew the importance even of that Georgia election. And it's going to be interesting. I'm wondering if they're going to be doing the same thing this next year, if they're going to be offering to go and do that, because we do need people, to do that.
Yeah, to help support one another as much as possible, because we still do have a lot of things going on. One of the blessings we know is that we do have a lot of momentum going positively for VP Harris and Tim Walz. But one thing that could trip her up really badly, and they're anticipating thousands of protesters, is the Palestinian war, the war in Gaza. Your thoughts? Any thoughts? Mary, I'll take you first.
Well, when we were voting, I was one of the people who got to vote on delegates here in Oregon, because I'm involved with the Democratic Party here. And one of the questions when people were running and before we elected them was we quizzed them and queried them and kind of ran them through several different questions, which I would not have necessarily thought of, but I'm happy that we did, to make sure that our very own delegates weren't going to be out there protesting, that they were going to be supportive of our candidate. At the time we thought was going to be Biden, but Kamala Harris. So, I mean, at this point, I understand what these people are saying, and I'm sure Fennell will give you she has a very wonderful argument for this, but it's to me, it's a little infuriating, and it's difficult to understand why you're not going to vote for democracy in your own country, but I'll leave it at that.
All right. Fennell, you had something to say?
Yeah, I do. So this is what I'd say. It is so complex. And I think for anybody to think that they have the answer, they don't have the answer, because we're not walking in the shoes of these people who are watching and seeing things of their families. And so I think it's really, really hard. And so I think that as I've thought about this, I think that they have been very strategic about what their goal is. And I think we don't always see that, because we hear some of the stuff that people are just talking, some of the rhetoric, and we hear it, and it's really infuriating. But I think the folks who have planned it have been very strategic in saying, this is what we're doing because we want you to hear our pain and hear what we're going through. So I just believe that President Biden, though he has way more information than we have, if you're sort of watching it, you're just like saying, what the heck is going on here? So I'm going to believe that Vice President Harris has been very thoughtful about what needs to happen here. And I'm going to believe that she's hearing what they have to say. And I'm going to also hear that the right people are there protesting, because there is a way to protest. That's what this country is all about. Right. And so they get the right to go there and protest. And I'm going to believe that because what they're doing is so serious and so personal to them, that they'll not want it to be perceived in a way that takes away our democracy. But I understand what is happening. But what I tell Mary when we talk about this is that when you're on a plane, when something terrible is happening, what do they tell you? They say, put your mask on first. Put your oxygen mask on first. And I think that if we're going to help the Palestinian people, we have to help ourselves first. And then once we do that, I think that Vice President Harris will do the right things that need to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
May I echo Mary real quickly, Pamela? I literally had to tick and clap in behind the scenes, because in one of my bullet points, it was specifically that. Be clear, your choice is your oxygen mask. Because one thing about it is, the same way that there's all this deflection about crowd size and ethnicity and all the other things that can stray those who follow bouncing balls real quickly, who follow the carnivals, like feelings are orgasmic. It's a lot of shooting lights and a lot of non-reality. So to stay focused, put on your oxygen mask first, and then you can be grounded and helpful to everyone else. And that's what voting does and is when you have choices to make. And the choices are very clear, because the words of the candidates will help you decide. 45 and his children have made it very clear that they believe that leveling out that land makes great waterfront property.
They did that.
Or you can go with the candidate who is basically still trying to work through what empirical, long-standing empire promulgation of laws have been, but to find a way to start to help the steamboat turn. Laws, policies, how countries and empires change are steamboats, not jet skis. So you've got to coalesce, be collective, be unified, so that the numbers will help us move the steamboat.
I like that imagery. It's it's a steamboat that we're on, not jet skis. But I tell you one thing is that made it painfully clear to me, KL, Mary and Fennell, is that Project 2025 and the way they kind of have already implemented some things and kind of smooth other they have been planning, and they wrote, and then like VP Harris said, can you believe they wrote it down for us to go by page by page? And the thing is that we have to when somebody tells you something, who they are, we have to believe them. That's who said that, Mary?
I'm not sure.
Maya Angelou.
Angelou said that. If somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Believe them. And so we have to believe this thing called Project 2025 because it's already happening with the abortion ban rollback. Look at what the Supreme Court already did. They've set it up for Trump to be okay. No matter what, he's immune from stuff. I mean,
they're planning a coronation.
Exactly.
And you can call that being pessimistic. You can call it, I figure it's pragmatic and it's logical. Maybe that is my analytical brain. So again, not that I don't lean into joy and happiness and the thrill of all of this.
Right.
If she literally becomes a president, I have 1 degree of separation on many fronts. So trust me, it is difficult not to be giddy. However, the way that I've been built since I've been here is to be pragmatic. I was a 2-year-old that worried great-grandparents with tons of questions because it is how I am built. And I pray that is because I am a vessel for ensuring that we just level out the field, take it in, breathe, but marinate on action. On action. That's it. Feelings are orgasmic like carnivals. So we got to get out of the flashing lights and all the zhuzh and be excited, be ecstatic, because goodness knows, I think most of this country took a collective sigh when we realized, oh my gosh, there is really going to be an option here, a real, true option, somebody that believes in the values and the people and being able to be in position of power. This will in many ways be the first time in this nation that someone literally may line up with a lot of what the majority of people who are in the working, the poor, and the middle class want to see happen in a way that doesn't necessarily get swallowed up by corporate money. Because a lot of times their agendas come off the bat first. Because when you walk in with a check and you tell someone, this is what I want you to do, that's a lot more incentivized than saying, we just believe in you and these are the things we'd like you to do. We've got to ensure that we treat our officials from the school board to the president like they're employees. And that means I hired you to do these things. I'm going to keep putting pressure on you to ensure you do a good job. When you move this way too far to the left, too far to the right, in terms of moving away from what we've asked you to do, we're going to hold you accountable. Right. And then we're going to vote you back in office, or we're going to vote the next person up. We get enamored with power, with roles, and we've crown these people more than people, and it is to our detriment. So one of the things I do want to amplify, one of the comments, we keep thinking that we're dealing with people who are somehow going to just fall to civility and what makes sense and rhetoric and legitimacy. These people were willing to break the laws and go up to the Capitol and tear down the walls.
Yeah.
What we are facing, and I want to emphasize this, and again, with a foundation of please be joyous, please be happy, but do the work. What we are facing is a nationwide January 6th, because it is one of the trigger dates. If people don't understand why January 6th was January 6th, it is because it is constitutionally a trigger date. So no matter what happens at all the states and all the machinations and all the infinitesimal little pieces and parts that need to move, all of this is still bound by the U.S. Constitution and the U.S. Code, statutes. And if those dates, those markers are not hit, so we can do all the voting we want to do and be happy about it and be optimistic. I want us to breathe and live in that. It is what's healthy. It is what keeps us functional. But we also need to be analytically keen and infrastructure sound. And when those key dates are not hit, January 20th, January 6th, the fourth Wednesday or the fifth Thursday in December, there are very structured dates. We don't realize it as voters because we like, whoo, I voted. Oh my goodness. Whoo, I'm done. I didn't stand it. We have that discussion. We don't realize all of the steps that happen after that when the electors. So until we get rid of the electoral college, because none of this would be a conversation if there were no electoral college.
Which goes back to my old question that I said before.
We don't.
Should have gotten rid of that crap after Bush versus Gore in the Supreme
And
Court.
that was a trial balloon. People aren't connecting the dots. Bush versus Gore was a trial balloon to see what would happen with the courts. January 6th, 2021 was a trial balloon for then how do we mimic and replicate this across the states. The problem is we keep seeing as the people who want to do all the great things for community and the collective and do the right thing and rah, we keep missing with tunnel vision that these things are connected. Those were trial balloons. Bush versus Gore was trial balloons. It was the first time that literally in the modern era, they straight played in our faces because you had a governor whose brother was one of the candidates in contention. And the governor said, don't worry, Florida's got you. And imagine that the Supreme Court stopped counting and we did nothing. The majority of the January 6th rioters and insurrectionists aren't punished in a way that is sufficiently a deterrent. So what they've seen is there are no consequences. There's no consequences to stealing this. So I'm just saying we need to be aware and alert and understand that we've got to have infrastructure because it's going to come at us from various angles. So yes, one of the main things we really need to keep visiting and push accountability for is dismantling the Electoral College. It is an institution from enslavement.
Yeah,
because to tell me that in every state in the union is wonderful and has all the great things, but when the states who anchor this country send in the majority of money that then gets disseminated down for the other states to operate, it's really interesting that everybody only has 2 senators, but not 2 senators worth of skin in the game.
Yeah. This is an interesting question that Zachary came up with. He says, does anyone know how much money AIPAC has given VP Harris? Because we lost our Corey in Minnesota. We lost her and we lost Jamal because of AIPAC and the money. Have they? I don't know.
You can pull their Federal Election Commission documents. It's all public record.
Okay.
And you can look at every donor and the amounts that they've given and when they've given it. Because sometimes candidates will have accepted donations, but if you look a year later after they've been in office, they no longer accept donations for whatever their own individual reasons are. So let's say when she was attorney general or the state's attorney or district attorney, that there may have been some investment from some donors that when she became VP and on the ticket that they no longer receive donations from. So in this particular, since we literally are on an accelerated timetable, so her Federal Election Commission's filings are very fresh because she's literally just been designated the candidate. So that's where you'd have to check to be factually accurate.
That's another thing. I got a text from a friend of mine, and he's in this group, and he said to me, Pam, what do you think? He says, I just don't feel that that Kamala Harris has come out with her platform or anything just yet. And I feel like it's like she's getting a pass. Mary, what do you think about that? She just got the opportunity of a lifetime 3 weeks ago. So I don't know what kind of pass you think she's getting, really.
I'm just looking here. I could have sworn I just saw that she did come out with some things already, didn't she?
She came here to North Carolina and she talked to
just-
her about her economic
Yeah,
situation.
she just
Oh,
laid out. Yeah,
oh,
she just laid out some things. So I'm not sure.
yeah,
The
yeah,
federal subsidy, $25,000. I'm looking here for first-time home buyers,
yeah.
increased pay for Head Start teachers by $10,000. I mean, how long is it? How long she been out for like 3 weeks?
3 weeks, 3
Yeah.
weeks. That, and they were all, everybody had to have something to say, really.
Yeah.
Something
I
to
think she's done a fantastic job. I think I mean, look at her VP pick. I think it was the right person for the moment.
I picked him. I knew when
Did you really?
him on a interview, I said, "Oh my God," because he reminds me, growing up in Michigan, he reminds me of the dudes that I knew. They're just plain spoken. If they liked you, they liked you. They're cool. Just a cool dude. He reminded me of men I know.
Yeah. I
Absolutely.
think he does what I've loved to watch is just that he does such a wonderful job of supporting her and
Yes.
not jumping into the spotlight. You know what I mean? I feel like he's just and I honestly he's the perfect person for this job. I've just been thrilled with that.
Right. Right. Wonder what happened to Fennell.
I'm not sure. Well, you know what? I'll check my
Yeah.
text to see.
Let me
I don't
check
see
too,
anything.
because we're at the hour now.
Yeah.
Trying to see if she'd come back on, but at any rate, well, ladies, this has been a phenomenal discussion. Chat, you guys have been great. Thank you all for your participate. Oh, wait a minute, something in the private. Maybe she.
And could I ask one other question?
Yes.
KL, you mentioned that you had some resources for us.
Yes. Whenever Pam is at the point where it's okay to provide that information.
Go ahead and provide it now, KL.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I also want to just, in terms of completing the backpack of goodies, Project 2025, which I said probably months ago, has a component that is not public, and that's why they had no problems releasing that 900 pages. The part that's not public is their training manual. And they already have people trained and on the ground and in place. And what it is there's going to be a stack of, again, the Manchurian candidate. There's going to be a stack of executive orders that will just be handed over for signature. That's just one aspect. So, oh, great, finale back. So just be very clear. There's public and then there's not public, because they know that this is not embraced or wanted or popular, and yet they persist. So again, we just need to be aware so we know how to govern ourselves accordingly. And that's really what I'm strongly suggesting. And we need everybody. We need to expand coalitions and build collectives, because it is critical that we, again, I'll echo for now with the numbers, it is hugely important. But we also need to have structures, scaffolding, and infrastructure in place so we can be ready for what is the known and the unknown. When I write contracts, that is one of my favorite phrases that I insert in one of the closing paragraphs of the contract: for the known and the unknown. And that's what we need to be prepared for. So that being said, some of the sources, because I think it's very important that people have reliable and trustworthy sources in terms of being what I'm now calling diabolically factual. We've got to be data oriented and diabolically factual. So I don't always have that fluff in my voice and that great sound because I'm so focused on facts and data. So forgive me. And part of me is highly concerned, but we need to, again, I've already given a couple. commoncause.org, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, and 866OurVote.org. One of the foremost leaders in election law is Dr. Fernita Tolson. Then there's also Dr. Robert Reich, which most people see across the socials all the time. He really he distills it down to those nuggets, and you can trust what he is saying. So I think it's very important. If you're up for it, because again, I'm giving you something that crosses the spectrum. If you're up for it and you're kind of like me, the Constitution.
Hold on one second, Kale. What we'll do is that after this, you'll give me that information so that I can put it in the chat.
Absolutely.
I can put it in the YouTube chat, the Facebook chat, and the LinkedIn chat, because we have one LinkedIn user, and that way, everybody
absolutely
have it. Okay, go ahead and finish those.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that, Pamela. You are just doing absolutely your part, and I thank you. The Constitution, you may read the articles with respect, the sections and articles with respect to elections, the U.S. Code, the statutes that are with respect to elections. And again, since I'm covering the spectrum, you can also follow Kenny to Raw to Real, because this is Remixing Politics and Culture, and he is known in the culture. When you talk about plain speak, and then Reese with the receipts. And you can pace yourself and read sections of Roland Martin's book, White Fear, Clay Kane's book, The Grift. Go back to 2 years ago in the midterms and read sections of Reese Colbert's books on radical Republicans, because some of those people she featured, prophetic or not, are now people who are steps away from power. So you need to really get a grasp of their backgrounds. And one of them is that very interesting popcorn kernel who is running for governor in your state, my friend Pamela. So we really need to arm ourselves with data and knowledge and to be diabolically factual.
Are you talking about Mark Robinson?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, God.
Yes, Reese featured him in her book, and as well as J.D. Vance. And like I said, prophetic or not, she featured him. So again, like I said, covers the spectrum. You can go to the Constitution or Kenny Too Raw Too Real and Reese with the receipts. Read White Fear. Read The Grift by Clay Kane. 866ourvote.org, commoncause.org are really important resources. Dr. Robert Reich. Follow him wherever he is.
I had something on him tonight, but we talked so much, I didn't want to interrupt us again. Yeah.
And thank you for letting me share those resources, because again, it is a game of disrupting disinformation, combating AI, and slapping down these bots, because they are specifically targeting ensuring that this election is very much swayed by all of the mischief that they can get up to, especially in cyberspace. So thank you so much, Pam.
Absolutely. Anybody else for now, since you had dropped off? Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I do. And I'll be quick. So one of the things that I think is really important, and that's for people to join their local Democratic committees. Because when you join your local Democratic committee, you will get a lot of information and you will know where to go, what to do, where the most help is needed, how to volunteer, what to do. So I would just say my one takeaway for everyone, find out where your local Democratic committee is, join it, and then you can help.
Okay. Mary?
Nothing to add. Nothing to add. It was a fantastic discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for participating. Thank you, ladies, for being on the show, for all of your information. KL, I know I'll get an email from you with the resources, and I'll put it in the various chats. And I appreciate everyone and your activity. I hope that if you're on YouTube that you subscribed, you like the videos. If you go to any replay videos, like them, make a comment or whatever, because YouTube is a beast to grow and it's a free way to support the channel. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you.
You're welcome.